Hello everybody, this is your Marion County Agriculture Extension Agent, Brian C. And today I want to address a couple questions that come up periodically this time of the year and just kind of throughout the growing season until the end. And what that question, actually it's probably two different questions that lead to another question, and that is, what is nitrate poisoning in forages, and what is prussic acid poisoning? And I can tell you that without going into great detail of the scientifics of it and the boring parts, I can tell you that both of those poisonings, although different, they restrict the oxygen basically getting to the tissue of the animal. And they have similar symptoms, but they're two different things, and they're often confused. And so I thought that talking about that would be a good topic. So first off, what is nitrate poisoning? Like I mentioned, it is basically it can cause death in livestock. Primarily we see it in ruminants, but nitrate poisoning restricts the oxygen in the blood, and therefore it can lead to death. So what causes it? When do we need to be concerned about it? And where do we need to look for it? And what forages and whatnot? Well, generally when we are concerned about nitrates is if a field has been heavily fertilized above and beyond what a soil test would call for. Now, nitrates can still be a problem even if you follow the soil test, but a stressor has to cause them to be a problem, a stressor in the plant. So a stress might be excessive shade or cloudiness, in other words, restricted sunlight. It might be drought. It might be herbicide damage or stress, or something that's just anything that has stressed that plant to would cause it to accumulate excessive nitrates. Now, if you've got a pasture that you haven't fertilized it with either manure or commercial fertilizer for the last 15 years, probably not really going to be worried about that field, because in order for the nitrates to accumulate to a level, and that is measured in parts per million, to accumulate it to a level in that plant, that has to be present in the soil. So some plants that accumulate nitrates or are likely to, or more likely to, would be Johnson grass, your sorghum, sorghum Sudan hybrids, and those type forages, and within that family. That's not to say that it can't accumulate in your cool season grasses as well. Wheat, ryegrass, fescue, they can accumulate in those as well. And of course, we would expect that more so in the spring. But it also can happen in warm season perennials, like Bermuda grass. That's somewhat uncommon, and there's actually a really good chart in the fact sheet that is put out by the University of Arkansas. That number for that fact sheet is FSA 3024, and you can find that on our website, www.uaex.edu. It actually shows the likelihood of that forage to accumulate nitrates, and they kind of base that on samples that have come in from the lab and some other factors. But it's really interesting to look at. But Generally what we associate high nitrates with are those cool season or the warm season annuals or Johnson grass. And so those can accumulate the nitrates. Nitrates accumulate in the lower third part of the plant. So the bigger the plant gets, the less likelihood it is that that nitrate is spread out throughout the plant. And if they're grazing it and they're just nipping the tops off the plant, then it's not as big of a concern. If you can test for the presence of nitrate with a test kit that I have in the office. It will tell you if there's nitrate present, but it will not tell you to what degree it is present. That is a lab test that has to be done. You'll have to mail it to a lab that does that testing. We have a lab in Fayetteville that'll do that testing. I think it's $8 to $12, something like that, or maybe even just $6. I'd have to look. Anyway, it's not much, and that test will tell you parts per million. You can test grasses as they're standing in the field, or you can test dried hay or silage or things like that. Now, mentioning silage, nitrates can, by ensiling it, you can reduce the nitrates by 50%. So if you have a crop of hay that you've tested for nitrates and it's high to where it would cause death or abortion in cows, then you could ensile it and possibly alleviate some of that problem. Another thing to think about is, are there other plants to eat besides maybe the Johnson grass that has the high nitrates? And basically diluting the nitrate by making a variety of things to be in the diet. So if you have hay that you already cut it, baled it, tested it for nitrates, and you find out it's high, then you can, if you have another hay that's not high in nitrates, you can feed Rusty. I'm making a video, okay? You can you can feed that hay that's not high in nitrates one day or 1 or 2 days, and then slip in a bale that has got the high nitrates for one day, and therefore diluting it. If you have a hay grinder, which is nice, not everybody has one of those, then you can grind it, mix the hay together and dilute it that way. But those are kind of some strategies to help with that. So if you cut hay, or if you cut forages that are high in nitrates, through the hay process, those nitrates are not diluted. They're still there. So it's a good idea to test before you cut the hay, and that way you can make a decision of either baling it or letting it grow and get bigger to dilute the nitrate level. Spread it out within the plant and cutting it at a higher height, cutting the forage at a higher height, so that you leave, remember, the nitrates concentrate in the lower third of the plant. So cut it higher, leave some of that nitrate behind, can help. So if you test before you cut, it can save you, just gives you more options to try to make that forage usable. Whereas if you just bale it, as you normally would cut and bale it, then it might not be worth much of anything besides mulch. So, prussic acid. Prussic acid can be present in Johnson grass, sorghum Sudan, those hybrids or sorghum, and basically it can appear when the plant is stressed in some way, whether it be drought induced stress or a frost. And we see more prussic acid issues, I would say, than we do the nitrate problems, at least in our area. So, if we're in a drought and the plant looks to be wilted, and then it could be that it has a prussic acid accumulation and could be poisonous. Again, it causes a lack of oxygen in the blood, leads to death within a half hour or less. And so generally we will not see it in any other plants like the cool seasons, fescue and Bermuda and things like that. It's pretty specific more to those sorghums and sorghum Sudan and Johnson grass. And that's, generally when folks come asking about Johnson grass poisoning, they're generally going to be talking about the prussic acid issue. And so that is generally the prussic acid. What can you do if you've got Johnson grass, you're in a drought situation, you need to graze it, you need forage, what can you do? Well, unlike nitrate poisoning, you can cut the grass, let it dry, and then through the drying process, the prussic acid is essentially gone, and it's safe for the animal to eat once that plant is turned dry and brown. Also, the shorter the plant, the more concentrated the prussic acid is going to be in the plant. So if the bigger you let the plant is, the more likely, the safer it is for an animal to eat it, a cow or calf, for instance. So the plant height is a thought. Also, if you're going to turn in on some Johnson grass, turn the cattle in on a full stomach of something else, to where they don't go in there hungry and they just start eating it and gorging themselves on it. And also turn them rusty. And turn them in the evening, after dark, and also if you have an event like a frost, then wait until it'll be killed by frost, Johnson grass will. Wait until it turns paper brown, or 7 days after the frost, and then you can turn in on it and they can consume the Johnson grass then. If you've been in a drought situation and it has rained, pull them off of the Johnson grass if they're already on it, or do not turn them back in or onto Johnson grass until 4 days after the rain. And again, the bigger plants tend to be safer. The short stuff is more dangerous, and that's kind of the issue. Is sometimes with Johnson grass, you'll have tall plants and you'll have short plants throughout the field. Here's some Johnson grass, and here you can kind of see we've got some bigger plants. They've got the seed head on, and then we have some smaller plants all around it. So that's kind of what I was talking about with different size differences in the plants. And you've got some over here, just different sizes. The more of it in the field, of course, the more danger that you're going to have, because if they're grazing fescue and other grasses out there, Bermuda grass, and then they take a bite of Johnson grass, it dilutes it, and then doesn't necessarily mean it'll kill them right off. But it's just a roll of the dice. You can, like I say, you can test for nitrates through a lab and tell you the parts per million. Prussic acid, you cannot test it. Well, you can test it, but prussic acid changes so quickly within the plant that if you sample it today, send it off, get a results in 7 days, it could be totally different conditions in the field, and you could have a rain event, and overnight you've got prussic acid problems. So generally, don't recommend having the prussic acid test done, because it just basically things change quickly, and it's not really you can't really plan around it, even with the test. We just have these guidelines, and so the prussic acid fact sheet number is FSA 3069, and that is a very good fact sheet. I've handed that one out a lot over the years. It's very informative and talks about some of those guidelines that I've mentioned and probably a few more that I've forgotten. And so that is the difference between the prussic acid and the nitrates. Nitrates accumulate and they're there. You don't get rid of them through haymaking or letting the plant dry, but you can reduce the nitrate content through ensiling the forage. The prussic acid fluctuates. Once you cut it and let it dry, it's safe. Read both of those fact sheets. They go into more detail than I've talked about today. And just, follow the guidelines. Nothing is 100%, with prussic acid is what I tell folks. So, and nitrate is a little more stable. You can kind of figure out what's going on and plan accordingly. With prussic acid, sometimes it's just not that easy for the lack of testing accuracy or reliability and things like that, and the changing conditions in the field. They are something to respect and to think about, but don't let it scare you to death. I mean, if you've lost animals, then they're probably going to be pretty leery of it, and rightfully so. But they are forages that are useful. They're good. They help to fill in the grazing gaps in the season. But it is good to know about these issues and to understand the difference between the two, and and that way you can manage appropriately for both of those. As always, if you've got any questions, you can contact me at the Marion County Extension Office, or you can, if you're watching this and you're not in Marion County, there's a county extension agent in every county in Arkansas, and if you're in another state, sometimes they're more regional, but there is an extension agency in your state. There's one in every state, so look them up, give them a call. They've got folks that can help you or are willing to help. And so anyways, thank you all for watching, and until next time, we'll see you later. Rusty, you didn't make your appearance. I was waiting for you to make your appearance. You want to hop up on the truck? Load up. Good boy. Come here, buddy. Load up.